Hello everyone and welcome back to My Girlfriend Gets Revenge on the Tibia Boatman. We're starting off strong this week as one of the first things the girlfriend did upon starting the game was run straight back to the Tibia Boatman and give her a piece of her mind. And I don't know what it was about round 2, but you can see she isn't struggling as much here. She isn't panicked about being overwhelmed. She has a little bit more combat awareness now of what's around her and makes sure she takes time to clear out some of the more cumbersome mob enemies. Also, being backed up by her walls is helping her a great deal. The confidence it lends her when going into fights really shines through. And what I see on my end when I watch her do combat like this, or when she really gets stuck in, is a look of determination comes across her face, and she really does put her all into it, even in the moments when shit goes south. And no sooner does she start the fight against this watery bin, does she end it. But with no time to hang around, she gives a cursory glance over the area, finding only the most obvious of items, before making off in the easternly direction, where she finds herself bordering into Caelid. Now, the girlfriend was aware of Caelid long before she actually played Elden Ring, because that's where she saw most of my playthroughs whenever I picked the game up. What she didn't realise up until now is that enemies scale depending on the area you're in, and Caelid is somewhere you're not going to want to be in the low 20s. She makes her way through quite a bit, taking out some basic enemies and some of the smaller things she's confident in overwhelming, before making her way down the edge of the cliff line where she can see some of the weird tree worshipper people thingies and eyeballing one of the tree avatars. It was at this point I walked into the room, as I'm leaving her alone for the most part when she plays this, and she points it out and asks what it was, to which I told her, "You're not going to want to fight that thing right now." Erd tree avatars, at least for me on my playthrough, were some of the most difficult enemies to fight in the lower levels, and I knew the girlfriend would likely struggle against just the base version of a tree avatar, and the fact she was coming up against one of the cursed versions would not have been a good time for her. So with that advice, she turns around and heads back towards Limgrave. She decides to go to the Third Church of America as she remembers that D marked a location on her map which she was sending her to go and see someone. After a bit of a look around, she finds the portal in the bush behind the church and then quickly realises that even though she's just left Caelid, she's now back there and she's in deep. She needed a little bit of reassurance as she turns around to spot a giant black gargoyle. I let her know that she's not in any immediate danger and not to attack the beast clergyman that she sees as soon as she goes through the doors. Before talking to the clergyman though, she settles down at the site of grace inside the church, and that's where she is finally invited to the Round Table Hold. She explores the hold a little bit, talking to all of the various NPCs and finding out what services are available here, before leveling herself up and then leveling up her Bloodhound Fang and one of the other great swords she picked up on her journeys. She learns of the Bell Maiden husks, and she learns that some of the NPCs here will also sell her things like magics and certain items. And just like everyone probably does on their first trip to the Round Table Hold, she goes through the middle door between the blacksmith and the maidens, and after seeing that there's some activity going on down below via all the bloodstains, she decides to jump down herself. Cautiously looking around, realising there must be a reason for all these bloodstains, that's when she realises she's just been invaded by Orbrick.
Ah, shit. Here we go again.
Now, I was confident that after some of the boss fights she's had and killing off 2 NPC invaders so far, that she wouldn't struggle with Orbrick, but that wasn't the case. Orbrick's variations of attack, how frequent they are, and how the delay between each different kind of magic and melee attack is so vastly different, she found herself getting overwhelmed with his myriad ways of attacking, and this was the same deal after a few different attempts at trying to take him out. Not wanting another rage quit session, the girlfriend decides to leave the Round Table Hold and go exploring for a little bit more, trying to find new weapons, new gear, and new ways to level. She finds herself back on the Weeping Peninsula on the western side, exploring the area she hadn't before. It's here that she travels towards what she thought initially was just a building in the wild, before realising the building has legs. Concerned she was about to walk into a colossus-sized boss fight, she called me in to ask what this thing was, where I explained to her that it's a walking mausoleum, and at least at this point in the game, they're not an active threat to her. Giving it a wide berth for the moment, she decided to head towards some ruins that she'd seen on the map. She wasn't surprised to see basic mob enemies in this area and flushed them out quite easily, and then descended down into the Tombs Ward basement. Cautiously making her way down the stairs, she sees some movement in the darkness and notices that the silhouette rushes her down. She ends up getting into a brief encounter with a page which she quickly dispatches, and then walks further into the basement only to realise there's a second page down here, but that doesn't bother her too much as just a few short seconds later, the second page is down for the count. Yoinking the treasure from the chest, she makes her way back up topside and quickly finds herself another cave. After her experience in the basement, she's learned not to run headfirst into the darkness now, so she pulls out her torch and descends down. As she sees the cave mouth open into a cavern, she sees more movement, and instead of rushing in like last time, she pulls back on her favourite tactic of stopping and observing. Now it's at this point I should say that I think there was a little bit of a perspective issue here, as the girlfriend, you can see, retreats out of the cave after seeing these enemies. And when we were talking about it later on, she described the situation to me as walking into a cave and seeing big creatures. And then when I reviewed the footage, I realised that the only thing she saw in this cave were the myconid people, like the mushroom-infected soldiers. I don't know if it may be perspective or the lighting was off and she just couldn't process the image properly, but I was really confused as to why she didn't just run in and kill these guys. I know the floor's made of poison and they can poison her, but these are effectively enemies she could still take down in 2 or 3 swings. But she didn't know that, and she didn't ask for help at this point, so she had no way of understanding the situation, and instead of getting frustrated and dying to an unknown enemy with unknown abilities, she decides to back off for a little bit and go explore just a little bit more. She makes her way over to the 4th Church of Marika, where she rests up for a bit, and upon leaving, realises the church is actually guarded by 2 headless soldiers. She backs off and goes around and jumps on Torrent, and then goes back to the soldiers and aggroes them out. She quickly dispatches these guys as well, and then decides to make her way over to a circle on the map that she recognised as one of the Evergels. Now, another thing she didn't know, as this was not something we had discussed at any point, is that the Evergels contain a different boss enemy. The last one she fought was the Bloodhound Knight alongside Blythe, but unlike that encounter, she doesn't have an ally backing her up here. Nevertheless, taking the plunge, she enters the Evergel and cautiously walks towards the purple mist, where the hero of Zoram emerges. Actually intimidated by the large size of this creature, she realised that it is slow, and it is not too dissimilar in its attack patterns than Orbrick. It has ranged magical attacks and some quick up-close melee attacks. But unfortunately for Girlfriend, she found out rather quick that when this thing hits, it hits hard, and unless you're pretty keen on the dodge button, you are likely going to be stun locked unless you find an opportunity or the right frame to evade. So over the course of the next 5 or so minutes, the Girlfriend throws herself at the hero of Zoram, dedicated to learning his attack patterns and ultimately try and take this down. But where she's still yet to learn that dodge rolling needs some kind of precision to make sure you don't take damage while you're in the animation, she finds herself spam rolling left or right quite a lot, and while this does help her evade a lot of its attacks, ultimately, when she moves in for the attack and starts to chip away, she realises she can do some pretty decent damage here. And although her stamina management has gotten slightly better, she still finds herself in some situation where she spams or panics and runs herself dry, leaving herself unable to swing anymore or dodge roll, which gives the hero of Zoram ample opportunity to stun lock her to death several times. Not wanting to face a repeat of Orbrick, she backs off once again and goes off for another wander, where something happened that hasn't happened to me in my playthroughs of Elden Ring yet, or at least I can't recall happening to me in my playthroughs. She finds a watchtower which she scrambles up and takes out a mob on the top before opening a chest which has sleeping gas in it, which transports her to Leyendell, the royal capital. Now this is something I can't remember happening to myself. I don't know if this is something I did in my playthrough intentionally or not, but you can see in the footage here The girlfriend's panicking a little bit. She wasn't expecting to open a trap chest and get whisked away to a whole new location she's unaware of, but then she quickly realizes she's on top of a giant tower with an elevator shaft just behind her, but with no elevator to call. And when you look around the other way up a set of stairs, you can see a golem just lying there on the floor. The girlfriend was not aware if this thing was already dead and just decoration, or if it was going to get up when she got near to it. As she got closer, she saw one of the phantoms of another player in the area just dawdling about, so she assumed it was safe and went forward. Except when she walked further into that area, the golem actually woke up and she ran. She noped out, and understandably so, she was in a situation she was not prepared for. She rushes back to the site of grace and then finds herself teleporting to the 4th Church of Marika once again, and that's where today's day of excitement had come to an end for the girlfriend. Now the girlfriend is making some pretty decent headway. She's already impressed me with a lot of stuff that she's done so far, with and without me in the room. But little did we know, the session that was to come afterwards a few days later would be above and beyond anything any of us would have expected at this point. But you'll have to wait until the next video for that one, and until then, we will see you next time.